You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, everybody, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And, of course, we are the hosts for this show. Well, this is coming on to a great start. Yeah, there we go. But, hey, at least the only technical issues we're having today is just my ability to talk. So, I mean, that right there is good. But, again, we're back with you guys. Of course, unfortunately, we couldn't do the show yesterday, but we are here today, and we're here with another review of Skeleton Crew. Now we're on episode 3, and of course, just the way that it happens to work with this show, I know episode 4 comes out tomorrow, so, like every other YouTuber on the planet has already reviewed this episode, but see, that's cool. Now you can watch all the ones, and then the one you care about, hopefully, is done at the very end, so I don't know. I mean, I'm still loving the show. And, of course, we're going to get into all the specifics, but we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I'm still loving the show as well. I think it's really bright. It's really fun. It's definitely, like, living up to what they... See, this is a show where they actually are delivering what they promised. That's one thing I love about this already. It's not like Acolyte where we kind of don't know what they're doing. This is, when they say it's Goonies in space, that's exactly what this is.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually, that's a good point. It was something that, I mean, maybe I felt this way, but I haven't been able to articulate it like that, is that it actually is delivering what they promised for once, which is a very rare thing in the Star Wars franchise lately.
Yeah, and I definitely love the addition of some of the new characters. We'll get into that, of course, as we delve into the episode. But I thought this was a solid, episode. I didn't feel like it was a wasted movement. It gave us some cool things to look forward to. So yeah, I mean, it was fun, funny, add a little mystery to it. So overall, I think it was a good episode.
Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, I think that one of the things, too, that's different about this one is that all the characters are very grounded. It's, it's realistic, but not realistic to the point like you feel like you're watching a documentary. I don't mean it that way. But I mean, the characters, and this is something that you saw in the original trilogy, the characters actually react the way people would react in these situations. You don't feel like they're acting or they're being over the top, or, like a lot of the Marvel humor sometimes is just kind of inserted into some of this stuff. One of the things that made Star Wars so great was the fact that when it came to humor, it was just very organic, natural humor. It was just almost situational. And you're getting that a little bit here. It's not trying to be intentionally funny. Okay, so now we've had a few votes. 3 so far. And this is interesting because first 100%, now it's not. When I said, are you still enjoying Skeleton Crew? 67% say yes, 33% say no. So somebody at least is not. So whoever voted that they're not, we would love to hear from you. Especially, yeah, you're right. Actually, you're probably right. It probably is. I don't know why my mind didn't go there, because we actually were debating with David the last time about this. But honestly, the only way that I could see that happening, and this sort of reflects the poll, by the way, that we had in our community posts, and that is, when it started out, I had asked, and this is before the thing premiered, I said, okay, are you looking forward to this show? Right? And the choices that I had were either yes, I'm curious on what's going to be, or something to that effect. And then I had 2 no votes. One of them was, no, I don't really care, something like that. It's not needed. And then the other one was like, I don't trust anything Star Wars does, that kind of thing. And the 2 no's were split at only like 9% each. And then the people that were looking forward to it, that was at like 18 or 82%. Now, the poll that I put up last week, when it was like, well, what do you think of it? And it pretty much went pretty close. It was 78% of the people were saying, I'm loving this. 22% said, I mean, it's good, it's just not for me. And then, of course, the other one was, no, I hated it. Nobody hated it. Most people think it's good. And it is. I mean, it's like the highest rated Star Wars show now, like ever. It's got something like 93% or something like that on Rotten Tomatoes. For the critics and the audience, it's like at 80-something%. So, people are responding to it. And of course, Ted is chatting in. He's usually our first one. He says, still loving Skeleton Crew. And I mean, honestly, there really isn't a whole lot not to love, in my opinion. I mean, it's, because we're I think you and I are pretty fair about these things. I mean, I would say that if there's something bad, we hammer on it. I mean, some people might even think we go too far with it. But we will point it out. Let's put it that way. But if something's good, we point that out too. And I don't know. I just think that so far, this thing is, one, living up to what it promised, which I'm glad you brought that up, because honestly, that's one of the most frustrating things, whether you end up liking the show or not. The only other time I think that there are two times. The Mandalorian was exactly what they said it was going to be, at least for the first couple of seasons. And then Andor. Andor was pretty much what they said it was going to be. This is only the third show that is basically living up to not only its promise, but also the hype. When everybody started saying, oh, this thing's going to be great, whatever, it's like, this is actually living up to the hype. And a lot of YouTubers, because again, leading up to this, I didn't watch them before I watched the episode, but I watched a bunch of YouTubers, the bigger ones, to see what they're thinking, especially the ones who have been critical of all the Star Wars shows in the past. Not the unfair ones, but the ones that give, kind of like us, legitimate, honest criticisms. They're all loving it so far. All right, so I guess we can get into this thing a little bit. What are some of the things that... usually we just sort of go along and start throwing things out there. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the, of course, them trying to escape the pirate platform, that was cool. That was entertaining. Neo is still one of my favorite characters.
I think he is my favorite. I think he's
so lost, and he gets so caught up in stuff. He'll stop in the middle of this whole thing and just watch stuff. Like, wow,
and he's adorable. He is adorable. He's absolutely adorable. He's adorable without being, again, overly cute, or yeah, exactly, right. Like it's not so on the nose. It's not in your face. He's just like an adorable little character, and I mean,
yeah, it's like a cute little kid. I mean, that's exactly who
he is. Yeah. Yeah, and he was, and I had that in my, as it should come to no surprise to people that have watched any of our review shows. I usually, put down a bunch of notes of things that I want to make sure that I mention. Because again, sometimes you're watching the show or whatever, even if you watch it fairly close to, because again, I try not to watch anything that we're reviewing until close to when we're going to go live and do it. Because I think I made that mistake. I sort of made that mistake with Andor, and what ended up happening was I'd watch it like the first day it came out, and those reviews, because I think it came out on, was that one that came out on a Friday?
I don't remember.
I don't know. Well, whatever.
Keep up with all these show releases.
I know. Whatever day it came out, we only reviewed it like maybe 4 days later or something. But I found myself having to at least rewatch parts of the show just to get a lot of the details in there. So then what I started doing was trying to watch it closer to when we review, and then on top of that, actually, write stuff down as I'm watching the show. So yeah, the Neil thing was one of my notes. And of course, again, I brought this up before, but the whole parent scene and everything, that's something we haven't really seen in Star Wars much. And it was a very grounded, very normal type of a thing. And it was good for them, even though it was only a small part of the episode. I think it was good for them to show us, hey, what's going on Ad Adden right now while these kids are off doing this thing. because, you know, we
Right.
left them to where they took off. The parents were worried sick. Normally in these types of shows, you would just see like, okay, you might see something happen at the end, right? They kind of bookend it. But I think it's really cool that they actually show us, like they're going back, like, hey, this is what's going on the planet. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, the process of them trying to find the kids. They're talking to the droid, and he's like, "Well, you know, we got to talk to the superintendent or whatever, because like, well, nothing's supposed to leave the dome." And so, but we're also kind of getting a little bit of exposition about Ad Adden too, though,
Yeah, that's true.
because it's kind of like Ad Adden is kind of almost like a little Wakanda, almost in one way, where it's kind of hidden from everything else, and maybe that's why it's so hard for our kids to find it. And um, excuse me. But yeah, so hard for our kids to find it, and then it's kind of like this whole mystery thing, because when you bring it up, all everybody's like, Hadn't, yeah, I've heard of it, but it's like it's like this weird mystery place, and I think that's kind of what is kind of alluring about it, because it's kind of like its own ecosystem, and it's like I said, for me, it reminds me of Pleasantville.
Well,
So
and to that point, you know, one of the things that they subtly bring it up, right, where they're talking about like Coruscant and Alderaan and stuff like that. It's very obvious because I think they even say the line somewhere. They don't even know a war happened. Like they are completely clueless that the Empire ever came, that a war happened. I think they just think that they're on, they're part of the Republic still, and everything is sort of the way it was maybe in the prequel trilogy. Like they're that shielded from it. And it's
yeah,
sort of like you said, it's like an unspoiled thing. It's almost like finding some island in the middle of the Pacific or something, and they're still, back in the Stone Age or something as far as their tech, because to them, no, there's never been any progress. Let me get this in from Ted real quick. I try to do this too, because sometimes he has to jump off early. He says, I didn't expect to see what was going back at the home planet, but was glad we got to, and yes, very Wakanda-ish. That's another good.
yeah.
It is. It's kind of like Wakanda or like a space Dubai or something. I mean, it's very, very.
Or if you saw the movie Red One, it's kind of like how they had the North Pole,
Yeah,
where it's kind of like its own little city
yeah,
within, like that no one can penetrate.
yep. That's exactly how it is. And so because of that, and of course, look, they're alluding to it. The jewel of the old republic. It's like one of the. They're actually bringing in, and this is something that I'll probably bring in as we go on, because there's a lot of Easter eggs in this episode. A lot of things that I think a lot of people might miss. There were a few that I even missed. But usually what I do is I see things, and when I see a bunch of things, I start going, I better do the whole Google research thing and see if there was anything else I missed. And sure enough, there was like a few other things too. So we'll be bringing that up. But there's a lot of like legends and just other lore that they're starting to bring into this thing. And that, I think, bodes well for the entire franchise, not just this show, because it shows a willingness now to reach into some of the things, particularly in what's now Legends, that has been established, that has had people that have been into it for decades, basically, because the expanded universe started in 91. Just because Disney rebranded it Legends doesn't mean that people still aren't fans of all that, because we've had decades of that information trickling in that for us, even though Lucas didn't pay attention to it, it was canon. So that's cool. Speaking also of the groundedness of all the characters and the parents, I also like the fact that the kids don't trust Jod very much. Like right out the gate, there's no, hey, you broke us out, we're a team now. I mean, they're giving him crap about maybe not being a Jedi. They're like at every turn.
That was actually like one of my favorite, funniest moments, because he's all trying to prove like, well, he's got to be a Jedi. How else would you make a key flow? She's like, hundreds of ways. He's like, name one: repulsor rays, magnets, a string. I mean, The fact that she just was rattling this stuff off to him
Well, you know
and
what's
just made it look
interesting? That
so
actually
stupid
brings
was
in
hilarious.
that brings in one of the Easter eggs. Because if we remember, I forgot the
Yep.
character's
Obi-Wan.
name, but Obi-Wan. Yeah, the guy
Obi-Wan.
was
Yep.
faking being a Jedi. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
it was a nice callback to that. But yes, absolutely. You pretty much have this situation where it's like, look, these people are not, even though they're kids. Now, Wim, of course, is because he just has this desire to.
He's just so wide-eyed and bushy, like he's just so
well, and he practically
naive to the
worships the
world.
Jedi too.
Yeah.
You
He's
know,
blind to a lot of stuff, yeah.
Sure. I mean, if anybody even presents themselves remotely close to a Jedi, he's going to be all over that. Whereas Fern, KB to a point, even Neil to a degree, they're a little bit more like, well, let's step back here. I mean,
Hold on a second, Junior.
I mean, I thought that part was really cool. And I mean, the fact that even when they get, SM-33 back, it's like, I mean, he doesn't trust Jod either. It's like there's this whole basic uneasy alliance, but they don't overdo that. The other thing that's nice, too, is that usually you would get a little bit more of a cantankerous, back and forth between the characters, and you don't. I mean, they still basically work together. They just don't 100% trust each other.
Yeah, definitely. Even with them, like, but what he was like, kind of looking over the kids, like while they were sleeping. He's like, like you can even see KB was just like, yeah, I still got to kind of keep my eye or my visor on you, But in a way, you can kind of see he was kind of looked like he was kind of having a moment, like, man, I was kind of growing attached to them a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely got that sense too. I got the sense that he's torn. On one hand, he does have that selfish part of him that he wants what he wants, but he's warming up. A perfect example of that is when he made the food. He's just eating it in front of them. They're all like indicating that they're hungry. He's just talking and eating. But then after he's done, he says, hey, there's food in the pot. So it's sort of like he is looking out for them. He does care about them. And I think you're right. I think he's fighting his nature a little bit. That on one hand, he's more or less using them to get to this planet that for him to get some treasure, but at the same time, he's fighting. And I think that a lot of that too stems from the fact that, now we find out, okay, there's a couple of things, and this also brings into the canon discussion as well. But obviously, Jadna Naywood is like one of the names that were introduced to him. And then, of course, Captain Silvo, which, if I remember correctly, is the pirate from the very beginning in the opening episode, the guy with the mask that was going around killing everybody, basically.
And
then, of course, they bring out the Crimson Jack thing. And that's huge. That's huge because, and this is one of the things that jumped out, is that I had forgotten where it came from, so I had to look that up. But it was back in 1977, Marvel Comics was releasing Star Wars comics at the time. After they basically made comic versions of the movies, they also released a series of comics, and then, of course, Dark Horse continued that tradition. But they introduced the character of Crimson Jack in that. And basically, he was the guy. What happened was after Han and Chewie got their reward at the end of A New Hope, they had enough money to pay off Jabba. And what was interesting was when you pick it up in Empire Strikes Back, it's almost like, well, I got to get this stuff to him. But in this comic, Crimson Jack actually stole that reward. He stole it from them. So he was basically, and he also popped up somewhere else in Legends too. I don't remember exactly if it was a book or if it was one of the comics, but he was one of those mildly, I'll put it that way, mildly recurring characters. And the fact that they refer to him now, by all evidence, I personally think they took the name, but but Jod's version of Crimson Jack is a different character altogether. First of all, he looks completely different. But I think it's just a case of they took the name, but they're giving him a different backstory. So that was kind of cool. But I mean, it does go into the fact, though, that especially if he was the same pirate from the beginning, from the first episode, him starting to care about the kids is pretty huge. You know, I mean, it's, you know, that's a big
Jump.
little stretch. Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
big jump. And I hope that is the case because it does show the dichotomy. And Jude Law is the type of actor you want in there because he could pull off both of those. Because if you think about it, when you look at that character from the first episode versus Jod, they seem like two completely different people. And Jude Law is the type of actor that can pull it off.
You know who he kind of reminds me of, and this is, but in the way that Jude Law is playing Jod is kind of how I wanted this character to be played. He reminds me a lot of DJ, like Benicio del Toro was supposed to play.
Yeah,
in,
I thought of that in the last episode.
In The Last Jedi. So yeah, I think because he's kind of that guy where he's clearly out for himself, but you know he's kind of got a soft spot for some things.
Yeah,
and there's that conflict, you know, that's within him, which I love when you see when he brought Kim into the whole equation.
Yeah,
I thought it was another really cool character.
Well, one of the things that I liked about the Kim character is the fact that she's very whimsical. You don't see that a lot in Star Wars. A little
really
bit. Maybe with Yoda at first.
Maybe a little Maz Kanata.
Yeah, Maz Kanata. Maybe a little with Watto even. A little bit of a different spin, but yeah, it's almost like something from the Harry Potter world or something. You know, I mean, it's like...
Well, yeah. Well, when I first saw it, I thought it was like Archimedes from like the Sword in the Stone or something. That's what I kept thinking about the whole time.
Like I said, SM-33 is like, you know, you flip those threes upside down, it's Smee, and that's from Peter Pan. Right. So, I mean, and he's playing basically a droid version of Smee. So it would not put it... I wouldn't put it past them to maybe borrow from some other things in the whole Disney, you know, franchise or whatever. Yeah. I mean, because you're right. That hit me a little bit too. Like, ooh. But
even the way like her whole little office thing, it kind of reminded me of like Merlin's tree where he had all the books and all this. That's, I mean, the whole thing, I was just like, dude, it's Archimedes.
Well, and I mean, even the picture that we basically see right there. I mean, that's basically E.T. You know, that's a little nod to E.T. with the big moon and all that stuff. So, you know, David joins us. He's like, hello, gentlemen. It's Star Wars Day. Sorry I'm late. Oh, then he wasn't the one probably that voted. Oh, he must have voted because now it's 75% yes, they're enjoying Skeleton Crew and only 25% no. Again, so far we only got 4 votes, so I'm guessing it's like, you know, 3 of them are saying yes. That one person. Still love to know who that is. If you're still watching, chat in and let us know why you don't like it. But essentially, I think that besides them borrowing some of the characters, they're not ripping them off. And I think that right there is the thing that's the best. They're
influence, but not ripping them off.
Yes, right. Exactly. Because it is nice to have, you know, I mean, Kim is sort of like Jocasta Nu in the sense of, you know, she's like this keeper of information and all that, you know, like a little library
Jocasta
type of thing.
Nu and Maz Kanata. Like I said, you kind of combine those two together. You kind of, I just love how the fact that she's like, oh, if you guys get into trouble, you know, call me. It's like, how? Like, at what point did you give us your number? Or, I don't even know where we are. Like,
I picked up on that too. I'm like, okay, well, I'd like to see how they're gonna do that. I mean, unless it's like something
bat signal or something that's shaped like an owl. I mean, like, what are we supposed to do this?
Well, I mean, and a lot of that too. You get a lot of things that, I mean, they're really cool, like storyline things, but they're very, very Star Wars things. You have the whole Uneasy Alliance, like I said. You have the characters going along, but not really 100% trusting, right? It's kind of like a early Han and Lando thing, right? Because, I mean, Han's like, I don't trust Lando, and Lando, of course, is a little shady. He ended up basically selling him out. So there was a little bit of that going on in this. And then, of course, you know, like you had pointed out actually early on, that whole escape sequence, I mean, it was really done well. Because, again, one of the things that I love about this show, and I remember I think you alluded to the same thing, is that you really feel like you're on this adventure with them. You feel like you're in there with them. And that's so hard to do.
And the world doesn't look boxed in. You don't feel like you're just like it's expansive. Even though we've only been to adding the pirate deck and basically
whatever this
Kim's
moon is
library. Yeah, it's whatever. The city library over
here.
here.
Yeah, I forgot what the name of the moon. He mentioned it in the show. I forgot what the name of the moon was, but
but
you know, I don't know, man. I think that you're right. 100%, because one of the things that I'm not doing is going, here's the volume. Hello, volume. You know,
right.
We've missed you, you know. I mean, you're right. It doesn't, even though that's another good point. I didn't really think about that. But when you really stop and think about it, we've only been like, 3 places? I mean, there was a couple of scenes in Ad-Adden. I mean, you could say, okay, there's like 3 main sets there, right? There's that little cave where they found the ship. There's basically the school, and then there was like his house.
Yeah.
So that was right. So that was Ad-Adden. Okay, cool. Well, then you flash forward, and now you're basically only getting the ship and the whole pirate deck. And maybe if you want to split hairs and say the prison is kind of like its own thing, you can do that too. But it was really cool how they're being suspenseful with some of the things like you had talked about earlier. Like one of the ones was when he basically ran into that old crewman, that crewmate of his, you know, that called him Captain Silvo. And he's like, you know, you could tell he was about to sound the alarm, you know, and you're just like, uh-oh. All right, David, you're going to want to see this. You don't want to see this. So David says, cherish this moment because it's never happened before. I was wrong. I watched it and it was great. Y'all were right. The story, acting, focus. Notice how I'm reading this a lot slower. Focus, characters are all great. I love the Afro kid and the elephant.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I live for. I live for the character, I guess.
Oh, description.
Descriptions, yeah.
Description or the misnaming of the characters when he starts calling Twilight or.
And Ted's amazed. He's loving the fact that David's.
He's like, David
likes something. That's fantastic. But you know what? I mean,
he agrees. I feel like radio.
Well, but here's the thing, and I mean, I share that, right? Because it could easily have gone the other way. I mean, how many times have we been super excited about Star Wars? Now, we didn't hate, I mean, except maybe the Acolyte. That might be where we were in the David camp on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're the opposites on Andor. But with all the other ones, I mean, I think maybe we just enjoyed him a little bit more than he did on a certain level. But it wasn't like we were talking about how great something was. We were disappointed by the shows too. And that's what made this thing. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I remember when I was watching episode 1, I'm like, wow, this is really good. I wonder when it's going to fall apart, you know? And,
right.
You know, but for the first time, and this is why I was sucked into it immediately, I think, because unlike the Acolyte, remember, the Acolyte did actually show a little bit of promise in the beginning. It wasn't perfect, but you were thinking in your head, okay, there's some good stuff here. If they handle it right, this could be really good. But the thing is, you're thinking that when you're seeing the episode. You're like, that's kind of cool. All right. That didn't really work, you know. Okay. They've got a good start here. Let's see where it goes. But this show, like, I felt like and this is enhanced even in episode 3. I felt like I was watching this fully fleshed out show that's been going on for a while. You
Yeah, I
know,
mean,
it
I
felt
think
familiar.
it's well. I think that was kind of the vibe that they were going for, because that goes back to the Easter eggs and things that we've talked about. Where
Oh,
we're
we
talking
haven't
about
even gotten into those.
whether we're talking about like ET, well, not
Well, we did talk
Easter
about
eggs,
that. You're right. Yeah.
like ET or
Right.
Sword in the Stone, things like that, like just
Yep.
things that we're
Yep. Peter
familiar
Pan.
with.
Right.
Peter Pan, yep, things that we're familiar with. That's like, okay, I see the influence. It's not a ripoff, but okay, and it makes sense. It's Disney's property anyway, so it's like, of
Sure.
course, I can mine my own stuff, right? So I think that's cool. Um, I really do like the even the dialogue between the kids, because you got Fern, who's a little bit older. She's more savvy. She's more streetwise. That's what I would probably classify her. Um, KP is very, you know, technical. She's almost kind of like what we said, Data or a Jodie LaForge from Star Trek. Um, Neil, like I said, he reminds me of the kid, Spider Man's best friend. From
Yep.
and then of course you got uh Wim, who's kind of like Spider Man, almost like a young little Peter Parker over there, who's
Or
just
Miles Morales.
idolized. Yeah, he's like idolizes Tony Stark or something.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of how he's looking at, Job, like, ooh, it's you're a Jedi, and he's freaking out about it. And just watching the dichotomy between those characters, how they're playing off each other. Um, Even when Neil sometimes has to side, like, this is my best friend, but dude, they kind of have a point, Like I
Yep.
love that they're honest, and that's the thing
Yes.
about kids. Is like kids are very on. Like you ask them questions, sometimes they'll just be like, "Well, yeah, he's stupid," and they'll just tell you that, like, okay.
Again,
So
this has a
I
very
love how true it is.
yes, it's a very Spielbergian dialogue between kids, because if you look at the George Lucas version in Phantom Menace, when they were all
Oh yeah.
fixing the speeder with the little
Oh my
Greedo
god.
kid and all that,
Yeah.
that was
That
like
was so.
scripted kid dialogue. That's like your typical
That's when you got to
cheesy.
send kids to court, and you're like, "Look, this is what you say when they ask you questions."
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It feels like these kids are just saying lines and barely being able to pull it off. But when you go to the Steven Spielberg type style, which is what this is, that's
Hmm.
when you actually see real organic, natural
Yeah.
dialogue, things that kids would actually say, and things that just characters in general would generally say in whatever situation they're in. So that's a very important thing that I don't think could be understated, because you're right. I mean, none of this stuff was over the top. None of it was, I guess, just out of place, would probably be the best
Yeah.
way to put it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Everything fit. Everything was natural. And nothing was forced. Um, like I said, for these kids to be as young as they are, the
Mhm.
fact that they kind of have a grasp of their character and know who their character is, and they kind of maneuver within that.
Well,
They don't really get outside of that. So
mhm. No, I mean, part of that is they don't suffer from the problem, which is true. It could suffer greatly because they had to find more age appropriate kids. This isn't like the typical thing. Like a good example would be Cobra Kai. They're playing like
mhm,
16-year-old kids, but they're like 25 or something. It's like
you're right.
you're not seeing kids who are much older than the character playing
Right.
that age. You're actually seeing kids who are that age, and they have a natural chemistry with each other too. That's what's
Yeah.
really
That's what I'm saying.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's just astounding. Okay, David says, so is Watson a Jedi or what? Or did he just con
Watson.
them? Yeah, little
We
Sherlock
don't. We
Holmes
don't.
thing.
Yeah. We don't know yet. I don't think he's a Jedi,
Nah, well,
but
especially if he's Captain Silvo.
I think he might have which is also hilarious. I meant to. I'm glad we're talking about this right now. Is when he was kind of trying to use like Jedi lingo, almost like, well, the Force is how did he put that?
Oh yeah.
Um, he was trying to explain the Force and
Yeah,
to the
then he
kids.
was like, "You got to trust your gut" or something, because that came up to be like when
Yeah,
Kim was basically like, "Oh, let me guess." He probably said to trust your gut or whatever. It's like,
yeah,
well, the other thing that was really hilarious too, and this is a very subtle thing. One YouTuber caught it, but Wim's all talking about, yeah, the Jedi are keeper of peace and whatever in the galaxy, while Jod is like beating the crap out of one of the guards, which I thought was a really hilarious. Like, that was intentional. You could tell that they were doing that intentionally, and that was
yeah,
the other thing that I liked too, and we'll get into that in a couple of minutes, because one of the things that they're doing, like with that, they're basically taking in a lot of things from the whole franchise. They're
yeah.
the description of the Jedi. A lot of these things are coming in from Legends now. This show, probably more than any of the other ones, is really trying to create not just a new story, because again, they're starting to link all this other stuff, which makes me wonder if that's going to play into the Old Republic movie, the Dawn of the Jedi thing with James Mangold. We'll have to see, but I think it's an important step that they're more or less undoing the somewhat compartmentalized feel of some of these other shows. Let's get this in from David too. He said the Force is in all of us. Yeah, that was right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and that was the thing. It's true.
It's
That's
kind
the
of like
thing.
Obi-Wan's little speech.
Yeah, that's why I was saying like he was kind of like ripping off Obi-Wan a little bit, and that's why I kind of chuckled at that. Like, oh, all right, but now this doesn't mean that at one point he might have started off as a Jedi and he maybe got disillusioned, almost like a
Yeah.
Dooku, and kind of just went off and kind of did his own thing. But of course, he still maintained his training on some stuff.
Yeah, that's perfectly. I mean, look, Grogu is following that pretty much. He
Yeah.
chose to be a bounty hunter, but he's still very much in touch with his Force abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses them when he has to. So you keep up. You're not focused on being a Jedi anymore, but you still have your little things. And plus, I mean, let's face it, the stuff that he's doing so far is pretty entry level, first year Padawan stuff. I mean, he's not shooting out lightning or force choking, or he's not, projecting himself or
blasters. Blaster bolts with his hands.
Right, right. Exactly. He's not doing some of the other stuff, which is interesting too, because it almost looks like Han Solo's blaster, the DL-88, I think it is. And that looks like the same style that Jod has. Like, as soon as he pulled it out and started using it, I thought that was cool. But let me just go through briefly a couple of these these things.
Eggs.
Yeah, these little Easter eggs, because they're not much. So Hondo's ship was actually seen when they escape. That was the one that I missed. But a couple and they, of course they show you the frame of video. It's like, these guys must just go like frame by frame and just scan the entire scene. I mean, nowadays you could probably just get AI to scan the thing for you, but I mean, it's just so bizarre that they catch this stuff. But yeah,
I would love to see him in this though.
It would be natural. He's a pirate.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, but I would love to see like someone like the guy who actually does his voice actually like get up there and play him.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Hondo's another one of those characters that just needs to have a live action version, because they could do a lot with him.
It's like when we saw Bane in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, Cad Bane.
Like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and they did a great job with, because that's more of an otherworldly type character. It's that was tough to actually bring that animation alive. But absolutely, I mean, Hondo. This is Hondo's world. This
is his world. Yeah.
I mean, maybe the Mandalorian. The Mandalorian would be okay too, because that would fit. Because that's the other thing too. Speaking of that, we're also getting a little bit more information on where this is really in the timeline. because obviously we know it's after Return of the Jedi.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure they've actually have they ever nailed down like exactly when this thing is taking place?
Mm-mm. I think it's closer to the end of Return of the Jedi than
Probably.
Mandalorian is.
Well, and here's the other thing too, and we know even by the sequel trilogy. Okay, now the poll is up to 80-20 in favor of yes, they're still enjoying it. So basically, they're still using the T-65 X-Wings instead of the T-70s,
Mhm.
like the New Order
Mhm.
basically was using. Not That's right. No, not the First Order.
You
Resistance.
mean Resistance?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Resistance. The Resistance were using the newer ones. So they're still using the original trilogy T-65s, which probably means that, yes, this is
I want to say
probably
maybe like
a
10 years.
young, maybe not even that much, because remember, Mandalorian and all those take place 8 years after Return of the Jedi. So
Is
it's,
it?
yeah.
No. Oh,
So
okay.
it's,
Oh, for some reason I thought that was further ahead.
no,
Okay.
no, that's why
Then yeah, then
it's
it could be
further
like a
enough, but not too
3.
much.
Yeah, it could be like a 3 year, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it's obvious the New Republic is somewhat entrenched just by the way
Mhm.
that they've described it. But again, I mean, this is what makes Ad-Atten so fascinating is the fact that they actually obviously are unaware that Alderaan was blown up. They don't know that there was an actual war. The little Easter egg with that little battle droid was kind of fun.
Yeah,
And then
that
when
was
he
cool.
said, like, did we win or something?
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. But there's just like a lot of little nuances in here. Oh, it's up to 83%, 17. So yeah, people are really enjoying this. David, you've started some. People are probably now like, oh man, if he likes it, then. So
Right.
David says these kids have great chemistry. All four of the kids are very diverse, but it doesn't feel like DEI. Exactly. They have more
Mhm.
chemistry than Ahsoka's three chicks. Daryl was right about them being good actors. The whole thing about, and this is another thing too. I was so happy when this show has been the runaway success because again, your star is brown, right? It's not
Mhm.
like, some white dude or something. Because remember, with the Acolyte, that was all they kept hammering. Oh, people are racist. The fans, they don't like
Mhm.
whatever. It's like this show shows you, like, no. Once again, if you actually write a good show, people will watch it.
Yeah, they don't care what color you are.
Right. And if you stop cramming all this stuff down everybody's throats when it clearly isn't, it doesn't even matter.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're going to do something like that, the way they did it in Aftermath, I thought it was cool. But the way they've been doing it in Disney, it's obvious like, hey, we got an agenda. We're just going to shove this thing down your throats like they've done with everything else. And people, it's
Yep.
intrusive into the story. And so
Yeah, and
here you have a diverse
you're not
cast.
allowing us to get lost in it because we feel you trying to program us
Yeah.
versus letting us discover it on our own.
Well, that's true too, right? I mean, it's kind of like you're not only with the programming and all that, but yeah, it's like it's it's an intentional thing
Mind
versus
probe.
just like something more subtle. Because my mind is so off today. I can barely form a sentence, and here I am trying to, host this
That's the
thing.
show.
Fortunately, most people I think are getting the idea. But yeah, I think that it's one of those things where when you actually look at this show, it goes back to those old messages from the stuff, the moral of the story type stuff. You have a lot of these relationships developing too. And that's another thing that you don't usually see in a kids oriented thing unless it's made by a Spielberg or somebody of that ilk. And that is you see the complexity of the relationships between the kids. You see the way each of them relates to Jod. There's
Hmm.
there's it's not just like a one-dimensional storytelling type of a thing. It has more layers than that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, I want to see more of Kim. I want to see.
Yeah.
Um.
See if you get my 3 again.
Oh.
Talk about what you'd like to see next.
Yeah, I definitely want to see more of Kim. Um. Oh, but before I even finish that, you were making a point about the X-wings.
Yeah.
Um. I love the fact that how they, because like you can definitely tell, like, okay, the New Republic are, it's like, okay, they're the new law now, and they're going after, and they're like searching all over. The fact that the kids, even picked up the fact, like, yeah, why are you landing the shuttle all the way over here? It's like, yo, because he doesn't want to get caught. That's what it is. So it's just, but then, like, of course, when the X-wings are like chasing after him, and then the fact that he sent the kids up there to, like, all right,
Oh
look,
yeah.
let's put you up here with the look,
Be the gunners.
and yeah, he did. They're taking pot shots at these, like, basically the government. It's kind of like, well, that's gutsy. I mean, you're putting your fate in kids' hands to do this stuff.
Yeah, I
But
mean, that's that's actually true too. But again, that's essentially what happens in a lot of those movies that were made back then. Those like kids adventure type movies, right? They always are
yeah,
able to do some thing that, maybe a prodigious kid could do, but it's like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. It's
yeah. When you send Luke Skywalker up there doing it like in A New Hope, that makes sense. I mean, one, he's been bullseyes and womp rats in his T-16, and he's old enough. Like, he's like 17, 18 years old. Versus like kids who are like 9. It's just kind of like, yeah. But it was fun though. And it was just kind of like watching these X-Wing pilots trying to dodge these kids, and even they got clipped once to the point where they had to land. It's like, oh, all right, now we got to try to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to get out of here.
well,
So I
into
thought that was cool.
that was. And honestly, to that point, it's also a case where you have a scene that could have easily have gone really far into kiddie territory, but it
Yeah,
didn't. Like when
it didn't do
that
the whole this is pod racing type thing.
well, right. That or just, the way that everything was done. It's like, no, those X-Wings were really trying to take them down. I mean, they were
Hmm.
trying not to blow the thing out of the sky because of the kids, but it
Right.
wasn't like some fun little type of a thing. I mean, it really felt like a normal Star Wars movie, which of course is also made for kids, but still, you have a situation where even the beginning of the episode when they were torturing the prisoner, I mean, there is enough in there where it's not a complete, like Muppet Goes to Space or something. I mean, it's not a complete kids thing like that.
Right.
It is more like
Yeah.
Goonies and, or even something like Stand By Me or something like that, where, it's a kid's adventure, but it does deal with some darker type of thing because again, I mean, kids aren't one dimensional either.
Yeah.
So, I
and
mean,
they
just
and they need to feel the. That's one thing I love, the juxtaposition he always would show, like when they were on at Aden versus like what's going on in
mhm.
space. It's like, oh yeah, you're living in this little pleasant little world down here, but here's where the real stuff is going on. You got pirates, you got smugglers, you got drug dealers moving stuff. I mean, you got all types of things going on in the upper atmosphere. You get to kind of be cozy down here on at Aden.
Or even out there because I mean, the thing that's funny about that is that's absolutely true because I remember when I was watching the episode, and I brought this up in the last review, I felt the threat in that bar. Like
Oh yeah.
I was nervous, like because again, I brought this up again at the beginning of the show. You literally feel like you are going on this with them. You feel like you're with them. Like that's not a
Hmm.
camera watching them. That's your eyes watching them. You're there.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult for a show to actually do that. And especially with the way Star Wars has been lately.
Oh
It's
yeah.
one of those things where it's like, all right, here we go. Another series. It's
I
like,
know,
I don't
right?
know. I mean, I'm going to just try to suck all the lore and canon I can out of it and, just say, see ya, right? But this show doesn't do that. I mean, you really feel like you're on this adventure. So they actually made the pirates really threatening. I mean, that
Hmm.
could have been just a normal, like a harder PG-13 type Star Wars movie, like Revenge of the Sith or something. So I like that they're doing that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, well, the rating though, that's what it always comes down to.
Yes, sir. I would rate this episode. This would be a good 7 to 7.5 for me.
Yep, I'm going 8.
Okay.
I liked a lot of the complexity and some of the stuff in it. Technically, you could say that it didn't. In some ways, it had more going on than the first 2 episodes. Sometimes, in some ways, it had less. Like maybe it probably slots
Yeah.
in between 1 and 2. More action and adventure than 1, because 1 was a lot of setup. But at the same
Hmm.
time, you know, it also had a little bit less in 2. And because 2, again, really made you feel threatened. You felt a lot of the emotions. But again, to be fair, I did in this episode too. And I just think that it's getting stronger as it goes along, which is what you want to see. Because in a lot of Star Wars, it's been the opposite. They'll start
Amen
out
to
with
that.
it's that dreaded third episode, because they'll always premiere episodes 1 and 2 first, and you're like, okay, cool, this is
Yeah,
looking
get you
like it's
sucked
going to
in.
be good. And then episode 3 hits, and you get witches singing songs, and you know, because remember that was episode 3. The
Hmm.
that's where it starts to fall apart usually with these things. So
I feel like
yeah,
they have been doing a lot of sing-songy stuff. Because even in Obi-Wan, you had third sister Obi-Wan.
oh yeah,
He's like, I'm like, okay, this is weird.
yeah. A lot of this stuff, a lot of Disney Star Wars gets weird. It's funny because we were having a conversation today at work. We were just in the warehouse because it slowed down
Mm.
toward the end of the day. I mean, the earlier in the day it was busy, and we were talking. I forgot what movies we were talking about. We were talking about something, and then Chad goes, "See, this is what your show should be." The entertainment thing. Get beyond the Star Wars thing. People would be into it. You know, like diversify
Oh
this thing. And that's when I joke with them. I'm like, well, you guys should sit in, call it the entertainment roundtable. And they're like, oh, it's actually kind of cool. So, but the point is that you essentially when you're looking at this stuff, right? Any of the shows, you basically have this problem. And this is where I think I've felt this way for a long time. You have this issue where they're trying to balance Lucas's vision with this like really high marketability thing. And that's when you start to see these shifts, because they're writing to what they think will sell, not what'll be good.
Hmm.
And that was one of the things too that we were talking about when we were talking about all these movies. One of the ones that came up was Jack Reacher. People that read the book series hated the movies because Tom Cruise looked and acted nothing like the Jack Reacher of the books. They prefer actually the series. The series on Amazon is like the author said is really really close. So you have something like that, okay. But see, Tom Cruise is a bigger box office star.
Hmm.
And he's been doing the Mission Impossible things, and they're looking at Mission Impossible and some of the other action movies he's done. And hey, we want some of that. And this is exactly what happens with Star Wars. You get a lot of things that they think people will relate to, and then you get the Acolyte, you get Ahsoka, which I mean, Ahsoka, its problems were mostly in the writing, I think, and some in the
Hmm.
acting too.
Somebody asking, yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of that was the writing. A lot of that was just they took a cool concept once again, and they messed it up. I remember one of the things we kept saying in the review was like, the show's called Ahsoka, but she's not even the main character. Like the first 3 or 4 episodes with Sabine, it's.
Yep.
I mean, it's like, when do we get
Exactly.
to actually see Ahsoka once in a while?
Right. And it's only 8 episodes, so
Only 8 episodes, and like 70% of that, she was just folding her arms and standing there. There's some,
Right.
that cool like lightsaber duel in the temple thing was pretty sweet, but
Yeah.
those
But
things,
as David likes to say, she didn't want to go to work.
yeah, yeah, a lot of people didn't, including the people making it. So that's what suffers that way. So a lot of times I think that that's the reason why you get that, because they're trying to balance these things instead of just doing what Lucas did. Look, just write and tell great stories that are timeless, that also have a timeless message, and you'll be fine. And for that reason, I think that that's why, we're giving fairly high ratings. We're not giving
Yeah.
9s and 10s because, both of us, I think, usually rate pretty much the same that, you really want to reserve the 9 and 10 for just some outstanding thing, some
Yeah.
some element in the episode that just stands out, or perhaps the entire episode is just magnificent and you want to reward it with a 9 or a 10. But that's 7s and 8s. That works too. All right. So tomorrow, obviously, they're going to be doing episode 4.
Mhm.
And I'll probably try to put up a poll maybe within the next day or two to see what everybody thinks of that ahead of when we go live next week, which, we'll shoot for Sunday. But if something happens where we can't do it Sunday, then obviously we'll still try to do it Monday. We've just been plagued with all these weird issues lately. So unfortunately, it's prevented us live, but we're going to still try to obviously keep up with the Sunday and Monday at 8. All right, so I guess did we finish? We didn't finish what else we wanted to see from the next episode.
Right.
Yeah, you wanted to say more, more with Kim, and that was one of
Kim,
mine.
I definitely want to see them get into him more about his whole Jedi thing. I think that's going to be like the next, and like why they keep calling him all these different names. Like, okay, she called him Crimson Jack. What does that mean? Because he's like, okay, well, I promise I'll tell you if you just get on the ship. So it's like, all right, now you got to answer the question.
Yep.
um, and I guess I would say like that whole Wolfman pirate dude who seems to got it out for him. What's his deal with Jai?
Yeah, that's gonna, and I think that, again, that stuff is gonna play out a lot. I think that what's gonna end up happening is it's just gonna basically be a dual story. Now they'll split it up into 3 because one of the stories could actually have 2 parts. But basically, the story obviously is getting the kids home,
Mm-hmm.
and also the parents. That's sort of like the second half of that. But then you also have this whole other pirate thing going on. You have this pirate mystery, and that's not even, I mean, really, if you even want to throw in, because when I say the kids getting home, I'm sort of throwing in that mystery of Ad Adden, but I wouldn't argue somebody saying that those are 2 completely different things, because technically they are. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, man, I think that, honestly, I hear you. I think that they've got to do that, but also the Jedi thing, like you said, I would be happy if they actually wrap that up in the next episode. That's something I do not want to see them drag out.
Mm.
I mean, do you think they're going to? Do you think it's going to be one of those, like, we find out in the season
I
finale
do.
things?
I don't not that, but I think we're gonna find out more about. I think probably maybe by episode 5, we're probably gonna get more about like, okay, who is he really, and what his ultimate, maybe not his ultimate game plan, but at least like there's what is his purpose, like what is his mission? Because
Or what's his end game?
you know
Like, what's he
that's what I
really
mean.
trying to
Like
accomplish?
exactly, that's what I mean. Like, um, because even when they were in the jail, he was like, well, if you got the force, why didn't you just break yourself out a long time ago? He's like, well, there's no point if I didn't have a ship. So
I mean, he had a point.
Well, yeah. Like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He got a point. I'm like, all right, good answer.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
my number 2 and 3 would be more clues about Ad-Adden. You know, I want to
mhm,
see a little bit more, and then of course this whole like Jewels of the Old Republic thing. I'm really curious to see because they had what was it called, the Great something. Um, there was like this whole like lore thing that was back in Legends and all that, and some of the comics actually dealt with it as well. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was like there was like great events, great something. I don't know. If somebody knows in the chat, or if you comment in the comments if you're watching the rebroadcast of this thing, let me know. I mean, I could Google it, but it's more fun to hear from you guys. But yeah, just more clues about Ad-Adden. I'd also like to see more about the Jewels of the Old Republic. But again, the ones that you're mentioning too, that whole Jedi thing, really hope that they wrap that up by the next episode. But you're probably right. They're probably gonna drag this
stretch
thing
out just
out.
a
Yeah,
little bit more.
stretching it out is a more PC answer, by the way. David says it's an 8 out of 10 so far for me too. So let's see, that's gonna be great. Now if they just don't mess it up, we could
Right.
actually have a nice chat review. You know, it's like, although sometimes it's more fun when they're not, because then it does actually spark
Yeah.
more discussion. But you know, oh, you know what else I wouldn't mind seeing? I mean, I'm going beyond our 3 here, but you know, they're talking about the whole thing about, hey, you know, what does your dad do? He's an analyst. It's like they're all analysts. It's like, well, what are they analyzing?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I guess I would probably include that in the Mysteries of Ad-Adden thing, but I'd be lying if I said that I was specifically thinking about that. I was really thinking more about the Treasure Planet thing, right? So yeah, it's like, why are they all analysts? What are they analyzing? There's something going on there. That's like a
Yeah,
definitely another subplot to this thing.
yeah. And why no one's able to leave the system, and
Yep.
like they're kind of like, yeah, there's a whole,
A
yeah,
lot. There's a
100%.
lot there, and I really hope they start to delve into it because this one's only like 8 episodes too, right?
Yeah.
So basically, after the next episode, we're going to be halfway through this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we only have 2 episodes to go, basically. Well, I mean, really, just the next one, but I usually, it's really in between 4 and 5. So yeah, once you see the episode. So yeah, we're basically 1 episode away to the halfway point. It's going to be really interesting to see what they talk about in the next episode, and is it going to be, because you know how sometimes, I don't know if there was a particular Star Wars thing that they actually did. I don't remember anything like it, but you see this in other series though, where they'll start out basically with a story, and like halfway through the season they wrap it up, and then they start telling a different story. You've seen stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they could do something like that, where maybe okay, they get them home, and then the season starts to turn a little bit toward the mystery, or I don't know.
You know, like, yeah, like what's going on at now.
Yeah, right. Like it could just take place there. Because you also got to wonder how many different seasons are they going to actually do with this show?
It depends. Well, since it's successful, who knows
Well,
so
but
far.
usually even when something's like that, it's almost like
I
the
mean, they
people
have
who are creating
probably
the show,
like
yeah,
something
they
in
have an
mind.
idea. They go, "Hey, I think I'm going to tell this thing in like 3 seasons or something." Now, whether they get that goes to your point. Like, well, it depends
Right.
on the success of the show. But at least they usually have in mind, because what'll happen is they might say something like that, like, "Hey, you know, we're going to do a 3-season show." Now, if basically they're canceled after the first season, it's a little late to do anything about it. But if they find out at the end of the first season, hey, we're going to give you guys 1 more season, we're going to only do this in 2. Well, then the writers will go back and they'll try to, compress the thing down to fit into 2 instead of 3 seasons. The Cobra Kai guys were going to do that. They had 6 seasons in mind, but they could have done it in 3 if they had to expedite it. But I don't know. I'm I'm really curious on how they're going to tie a lot of this up, because to be honest, they opened up a lot of really cool story ideas that could really be the plot of their own series themselves, you know?
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
don't know. All right, let's see what David says here. David says, what are they analyzing? I was very intrigued by that. Yeah. That's something, honestly, that really did, like, it just blew by really quick. You know, it was setting up a mystery, but it wasn't so direct. It's like you're starting to piece these things together, even back from the classroom scene of episode 1. So, yep. All right. I guess time will tell. We'll be back next week, hopefully Sunday at 8, reviewing the next episode of pretty much this wonderful Skeleton Crew show. It feels good to say that.
Yeah.
Just from the so many disappointments. All right. So what do you think? Is that it for you? You got anything?
That's it.
I always like to do a good of the order now, because a lot of times, I feel like I just cut everything off.
No, I'm good.
All right. So I'll see you guys next time. And there has been other stuff in the news, so if we're able to be on twice next week, then, obviously Sunday will be the review. Monday will be one of the other million pieces of news that's coming out. Remember, join our Discord if you want to continue the conversation. We got our Facebook, we got our X. So we have all kinds of ways to contact us. So definitely use that. So until next time, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the force be with you, always.